Papaya contains an enzyme that actively breaks down protein, not digests it slowly, breaks it down. Meat left in contact with raw papaya flesh will visibly soften and fall apart within hours. The black seeds clustered at the center are edible and taste sharply peppery, though most people scoop them out and throw them away without ever knowing. Wild varieties grew across southern Mexico and Central America, and Portuguese and Spanish traders carried the plant to Africa, India, and Southeast Asia in the 16th century. Today, it shows up ripe and sliced at breakfast tables across the tropics, blended into smoothies, and shredded green into Southeast Asian salads like som tum, where the unripe flesh is treated more like a vegetable than a fruit. Dragon fruit is a cactus fruit. That hot pink skin covered in green flame-tipped scales comes from a climbing cactus that flowers after dark, and each bloom lasts exactly one night before it closes and dies. The entire pollination window is a single evening. French missionaries brought the plant to Vietnam in the early 19th century, and Vietnam became one of the world's largest exporters. The dramatic pink color fades quickly after harvest, which is why dragon fruit in a supermarket often looks duller and less vivid than one picked that morning at a market. The red-fleshed variety stains everything it touches a deep magenta. The white-fleshed variety looks striking but tastes considerably milder. The next fruit has a name that has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with a flower that made Spanish missionaries stop and stare. Passion fruit was not named for love. Spanish missionaries arriving in South America saw the flower's structure and mapped each part to a different element of the crucifixion, the Passion of Christ, and the name stuck permanently. The fruit itself is a wrinkled purple or yellow shell surrounding a mass of gold seed pulp. And the wrinkled skin is not a sign that the fruit has gone off. It means it has fully ripened and the sugar content has peaked. Wild varieties spread across a wide range of South America, and colonial trade routes eventually carried it to Africa, Australia, and Southeast Asia. Today, it flavors dessert sauces, cocktails, and yogurt, and it is the key topping on the pavlova, a dessert that Australians and New Zealanders argue over with remarkable intensity. The next fruit carries its own royal mythology and has been called the Queen of Fruits across Southeast Asia for centuries. Mangosteen has a deep purple rind so dense with natural dye that it has historically been used to stain fabric and once served as ink. But the more useful fact is this: the number of segments inside can be predicted before opening the fruit by counting the small petal-like lobes on the bottom, every time, without exception. Records point to the Malay archipelago as the original home of wild mangosteen trees. The fruit grows very slowly and resists transplanting aggressively, which is one reason it took so long to spread beyond Southeast Asia. Fresh mangosteen was banned from import into the United States for decades due to pest concerns. Today, it is sold freeze-dried for export, juiced in health food stores, and eaten fresh across Southeast Asian markets. The next fruit is named exactly what it looks like, and the name comes from the language of the region where it has grown wild for as long as records exist. Rambutan means hairy in Malay. That is the whole name, hairy. And looking at the fruit, it is hard to argue with. The red shell is completely covered in soft green-tipped spines that look alarming and are entirely harmless to touch. Wild trees are still found in forest areas across Malaysia and Indonesia. The fruit spread through Southeast Asian trade and was later introduced to Central America, parts of Africa, and Australia. Inside the shell, translucent white flesh wraps tightly around a seed that is mildly toxic if eaten raw, so most people eat carefully around it. Canned rambutan in syrup is the version most common in export markets, though fresh rambutan is increasingly available in specialty grocery stores in Western countries. The next fruit is rambutan's close cousin and was once considered important enough to justify building an entire courier relay system to keep it fresh. A Tang Dynasty empress reportedly loved lychee so much that a dedicated relay of couriers on horseback was set up to carry fresh lychee hundreds of miles from the south of China to the imperial court before the fruit could spoil. The rough pink shell turns brown within days of harvest, which is exactly why that courier system mattered and why fresh lychee outside Asia remains genuinely rare. Cultivation records in southern China stretch back over 2,000 years. Trade and colonial networks eventually carried the tree to India, South Africa, and parts of the Americas. Today, canned lychee in syrup dominates international markets, while fresh lychee appears in Asian grocery stores during the short season. It shows up in cocktails, desserts, and bubble tea across the world. The next fruit is lychee's lesser-known relative, and when it is peeled, it looks exactly like something that should not be a fruit. Longan means dragon eye in Chinese. Peel one and the reason is immediate. A smooth, translucent white ball with a dark seed visible through the flesh stares back like a large eye, perfectly round, slightly unsettling. Records suggest cultivation in southern China and Southeast Asia for at least 1,000 years. The tree is sensitive to temperature in a specific way. It requires a cool period to trigger flowering, which makes it difficult to grow reliably outside narrow climate zones. Dried longan has a concentrated sweetness and is used in Chinese sweet soups and herbal preparations. Fresh and canned versions move through Asian markets across the region. The next fruit grows in a way that no photograph fully prepares a first-time viewer for, because it looks like someone covered the entire tree trunk in dark purple grapes as a joke. Jabuticaba fruits grow directly from the trunk and main branches of the tree, not from the tips of branches, not from new growth, directly from the bark, so densely packed during each fruiting cycle that the trunk becomes almost invisible underneath. A fruiting Jabuticaba tree looks genuinely strange in a way that photographs of it consistently get dismissed as edited. The fruit is native to the Atlantic forest region of Brazil and is still primarily eaten and processed there. The shelf life after harvest is just a few days, which has kept it almost entirely out of international markets. The tree can fruit multiple times per year. Each cycle covers the trunk completely. Brazilians make wine, jam, and liqueur from it, and it is increasingly known internationally through food and travel content. The next fruit also surprises people with what is inside the shell, but the surprise is about how the liquid got there. The 3 dark spots on a coconut shell are not decoration. 2 are permanently sealed germination pores. The third softens when the nut is ready to sprout, which is how the new plant pushes through to reach light. The liquid inside, what most people call coconut water, is the liquid endosperm of the seed, a nutrient solution the seed uses to feed its own early growth before roots develop. Origins of the coconut are genuinely disputed. Some accounts point to the Indo-Pacific, others raise South America. What is agreed is that coconuts floated on ocean currents and washed ashore on multiple continents before humans ever moved them deliberately. Oil, milk, water, desiccated flesh, coir fiber, almost no part goes unused in traditional cultivation. The next fruit looks like a reptile climbed into a tree and fell asleep there, and the texture inside completely contradicts everything the outside suggests. Salak is called snake fruit because the skin is covered in overlapping reddish-brown scales that look and feel exactly like snake skin. Not approximately like it, exactly like it. The flesh inside is dry and crunchy, with a texture closer to a firm apple than anything tropical, which surprises almost every first-time eater expecting something soft and juicy. Certain varieties carry protected geographical status tied to specific regions of Java and Sumatra in Indonesia. The best-regarded varieties are still grown in their original Indonesian regions. Freeze-dried salak has appeared in specialty stores internationally, and it is a common souvenir item from Bali. The next fruit looks soft and approachable by comparison, but hides a timing problem that makes eating it correctly harder than it looks. Langsat has a problem with its skin. The moment the fruit is broken, the sap from the peel releases and it is intensely bitter. Anyone peeling too slowly ends up coating the sweet flesh in bitter juice before it ever reaches their mouth. The trick is speed. Records point to the Malay Peninsula and surrounding islands as the origin of wild langsat trees. The fruit spread across Southeast Asia but rarely travels further because the shelf life after harvest is very short. The dried skin has a secondary use in parts of Indonesia. It is burned as a natural mosquito repellent, and the smoke it produces repels insects effectively. It remains almost entirely a fresh local market fruit with virtually no processed or canned international presence. Hey, the next fruit is one of the most widely eaten in Latin America and is almost completely invisible in Western supermarkets, despite being one of the easiest tropical fruits to grow anywhere warm. Guava spreads so aggressively in new environments that it is classified as invasive in several island ecosystems. Spanish and Portuguese traders introduced it to Asia, Africa, and the Pacific in the 16th and 17th centuries, and in some places it took over so completely that it pushed out native vegetation. The entire fruit is edible, including the rind, seeds, and flesh, which ranges from white to deep pink depending on variety. Wild varieties grew across Central America and the Caribbean, and the plant naturalized rapidly wherever it arrived. Guava paste, juice, candy, and fresh fruit are staples across Latin America, the Caribbean, and large parts of South and Southeast Asia. The next fruit is used in an almost identical way across many of those same cuisines, but belongs to a completely different plant family, one that most people would never connect to a fruit at all. Tamarind is a legume, not loosely related to one, actually a legume, in the same plant family as lentils and peas. The fruit is a brittle brown pod that snaps open to reveal sticky dark pulp wrapped around seeds inside. That pulp is the part used in cooking, and it dries naturally into a concentrated paste over time. Records suggest tropical Africa as the likely origin, though the plant has been cultivated in South Asia for so long that many historical sources assumed India was its home. Arab traders carried it across trade routes into South Asia and the Middle East, and it later moved to Latin America and Southeast Asia. Today, it is an ingredient in Worcestershire sauce, pad thai, tamarind candy, chutneys, and street food drinks across at least 4 continents. The next fruit looks completely harmless and produces a perfect geometric shape every time it is cut, but doctors actively warn specific patients to avoid it entirely. Starfruit sliced crosswise produces a perfect 5-pointed star every single time. The 5 ridges running along the length of the fruit are arranged so precisely around the central core that no other cut is possible. But a compound in the fruit can interfere with how kidneys process certain medications, which is why it appears on warning lists in clinical settings for specific patient groups. Records suggest Sri Lanka and the Moluccas in Indonesia as the likely origin zone. So traders carried it to Latin America, Africa, and Florida over several centuries. It is eaten fresh, used as garnish, juiced, and made into preserves across Southeast Asia, parts of Latin America, and Florida and Hawaii. The next fruit is the ancestor of something most Western shoppers see every week, yet the ancestor itself is almost nowhere to be found in those same stores. The pomelo is the original citrus that grapefruit descended from. Grapefruit is the child. Pomelo is the ancestor, and yet the pomelo is nearly invisible in Western grocery stores while its descendant fills entire produce sections. The thick, pale rind dwarfs the inner fruit, and the white pith between the rind and the flesh is not bitter the way grapefruit pith is. In several Asian cuisines, that pith is eaten separately or used in cooking. Records trace wild pomelo to Southeast Asia, likely Malaysia and surrounding islands. The grapefruit hybrid appeared in Barbados in the 18th century and eventually overtook the parent in global popularity. Pomelo is widely eaten across East and Southeast Asia, particularly during Lunar New Year, and occasionally appears in specialty citrus sections in Western stores. The next fruit reverses the flavor logic of every other citrus on Earth. Kumquat is eaten whole, skin and all, in a single bite, and the flavor is inverted compared to every other citrus. The rind is sweet. The flesh is intensely sour. The tiny orange oval looks like a miniature orange but behaves like the opposite of one. Records of cultivation in southern China stretch back over 1,000 years. And the fruit reached Europe only in the mid-19th century when a British plant collector brought specimens back. It spread to the Americas and eventually became a specialty crop in Florida and California. Unlike most citrus, kumquat tolerates light frost, which is why it grows successfully in regions where other tropical citrus cannot survive. It is eaten fresh whole, made into marmalade, candied, and used as a garnish. During Lunar New Year, it is commonly given as a gift plant in Chinese communities, the small tree loaded with tiny bright fruit. The next fruit looks safe and edible from the outside, but the wrong part of it is genuinely toxic and its import is restricted by law in some countries. Ackee is the national fruit of Jamaica. It is also illegal to import in its canned form into the United States unless it has been certified safe, because unripe or improperly harvested ackee contains a toxin that causes severe illness and has caused deaths. The fruit came to Jamaica on slave ships from West Africa in the 18th century and became deeply embedded in Jamaican food culture within a few generations. The red pod splits open naturally on the tree when the fruit is ready, revealing yellow arils around glossy black seeds. Only those yellow arils are edible, and only after the pod has opened itself. Eating it before that point, or eating the wrong part, carries real risk. Ackee and saltfish is the national dish of Jamaica. Certified canned ackee is available in Caribbean grocery stores internationally. The last fruit does not carry any danger at all. But it does something no other fruit in this list does. It does not change what things taste like. It changes how tasting itself works. Miracle fruit is a small red berry, and it does not taste sweet. What it contains is a protein that binds to sour taste receptors and changes shape in the presence of acid. Once that binding happens, anything acidic eaten afterward registers as intensely sweet instead of sour, and the effect lasts up to an hour. Lemon juice tastes like lemonade. Vinegar tastes like something else entirely. The protein is called miraculin, and it physically changes how the receptor fires. The more acidic the food, the more dramatically the sweetness registers. Records show the berry was used in West Africa to make sour or plain foods more palatable. Attempts to commercialize it as a sugar substitute in the United States in the 1970s were reportedly blocked, though some accounts point to regulatory processes and others suggest industry pressure, and the full story remains disputed. Today, it is available in freeze-dried tablet form and has been used in some hospitals to help patients whose medication has damaged their sense of taste make food tolerable again.